What's up, everybody? Welcome to another edition of the Sales Vitamin Podcast. We have got a great guest today. Tibor Shanto of Renbor Sales Solutions, Inc. is with us. He is out of Toronto, Canada, a veteran sales leader, sales trainer, and he is going to give you a ton of vitamins today, not just one or two. You're going to get a jar full. So we are excited to have Tibor on the show. Thanks for coming on.
My pleasure. I've never been a vitamin T, but everything's a first, right?
That's right. Hey, that's a good segue. I may have to use that as we promote this episode. Vitamin T.
Yeah, let's do it.
I like that. Hey, one thing I wanted to talk about right off the bat was I saw when you were younger, and this goes back, I saw a video and you had talked about a tango moment that you had.
Yeah.
And I thought it was really cool because it was really relevant. So if you could just take the listeners through that and kind of talk about that, I think it kind of sets up how you actually operate today.
Yeah, so I'll make it quicker than I do usually because we don't want anybody to fall asleep. But so when I was about 10, we moved to Montreal from Israel. So we were immigrants. We came from a tropical climate to a Arctic climate. And, so hockey wasn't a big thing for us. So we were all basketball. This immigrant neighborhood, we primarily played basketball. And, much like in school districts, you get through the regional and, we rarely made it into the regional playoffs. And when we did, we were disposed with generally in the first round. So we were very excited in 1970 when it was announced in June that we would be getting a new gym teacher in September who had been renowned for taking the schools that he was the gym teacher at to the playoffs, and he had won a couple of championships with different schools. So we were rocking and rolling, ready to go.
Yeah.
And, I always say that I made the basketball team for one reason and one reason only, is because in January of 1970, I was basically 5'1", and in September of 1970, I was 6 feet.
Wow.
And you know what they say, you can teach a lot of things, but you can't teach tall. So I had that going for me.
Yeah.
So when he came along, we were all ready to, go out there and play basketball. We had our skinny shorts on. I remember those days was, and, instead of doing basketball drills, he brought out a record player and he put on this old, sort of, ballroom dancing type music. And he very, gingerly danced across the gym, floor. And then he turned to us and he said, "Your turn." And we were all in shock, but we wanted, just again, think about it from a sales point of view, we wanted to go to the playoffs. There was enough incentive, enough momentum to sort of get us to do things that normally we wouldn't do. And so, I wouldn't quite call it dancing, but we did something that resembled movement across the floor. And this went on for a while, and, we sort of got tired of it. At first you had a lot of resolve, but then it sort of wears down. Just look at people, they get a list and they're ready to attack it, but then it sort of wears down. And the next thing you know, the bottom 80 people on the list never get called or approached or anything like that, right? Because just all these things stack up against you. So just as we were ready to rebel, he said, we're going to change things up. And instead of that old ballroom dancing, he put on a record that was the tango. And I don't know if anybody in the audience has ever danced the tango, but it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So he, to add insult to injury, or whether, he was a sadist or something like that, he had the girls come in and he asked us to do the tango with them. Now, 1970, I was about 13. Hair was coming out of the oddest of places in my body. My voice was cracking. So dancing with the girls, doing the tango was really beyond the pale. And, it really required a stretch, at that point. And we did that for a few weeks. And again, our resolve was beginning to sort of fade. But then he said, again, we're going to change things up. And this time we saw no sign of record players or anything like that. And he brought out the traditional rack of basketballs that you normally see in high schools or grade schools. And he asked us to do a layup, each of us. And each of us failed to different degrees. And then he went and brought out one speaker and he sort of laid it outside his office. And he put on the tango. And he did like a near perfect layup. 1, 2, 3, 4, and boom. As the old saying goes, nothing but net, right?
Yeah.
And then he had us each do a tango each do a layup to the tango, and we each did much better. Not, it wasn't as nice as his, but we managed to sort of follow the steps. And the rest of the year, we practiced all our drills, all our plays, everything to music, right? And so as a result of that, we knew where we had to be. We could think of the play and all that. This was the days, the heyday of the Jackson 5, the Temptations, there was a lot to work with. The
Yeah.
OJs, so there was a lot, that you can work with. And so we got to the playoffs. We went to the finals. We didn't win, but it was the furthest that any one of us had ever gotten. And it struck me that what he did is create a series of tango moments. And I can get into it deeply, but what I do with my clients is I tell them that my job is to create a series of tango moments for you. Because if you can overcome what's here and now and deal with it head on, then when it comes to selling and comes to helping clients and things like that, you're always going to be able to come up to the challenge, but you'll always be able to challenge yourself to go a little bit further because, change happens outside our comfort zone. And that's the big challenge, I think, for a lot of salespeople, is that the market requires that we continue to evolve, but our comfort zone requires that we don't. And I think it's that conflict that sometimes stops salespeople from being fully successful.
Yeah.
So I try and get tango moments. And one of the things I'm trying to do in the Proactive Prospecting Club is actually to start getting people to share their tango moments. So again, people can see that there is, life after prospecting.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's awesome. I saw one of your books. You've got 3 books out. Just so the listeners know, Tibor has 3 books out. Execution, Everything Else is Just Talk, Objection Handling Handbook, and then you co-wrote a book, Shift, with Craig Alias.
Yes.
Now, Execution, Everything Else is Just Talk. That's a cool title. And I know you're a tactical guy and very process-oriented. Why do you think we're not good at that really in sales? Or would you say, no, we're pretty good at it, but how important is that execution of just having a sales process in place?
So I think, what I've come to learn over the years, so I think it is important.
Yeah.
But I've come to learn over the year that, salespeople are people, contrary to what they say. And, semantics goes a long way. So over the last few years, I found that instead of referring to it as a sales process, if I call it a sales flow, it's all of a sudden a lot more palatable,
Right.
right? But, basically what a process is, a clear series of steps that you have to do in order to achieve an outcome that you set out to do.
Right.
And I think that if you looked at most organizations, I think most of them have a viable process. Some are better, some are worse, but most have something that we can point to and agree that it's a process.
Yeah.
So the next challenge is who created the process? How relevant is it to the market? And the most important is how is it being adhered to? Are the people really following it? Because, everybody wants a process because it just sounds right. If you're ever going to go for ISO certification, it starts with that, right?
Right.
So it sounds good, but the hard part is implementing it. As with anything, everything looks good on the whiteboard, but as soon as it hits reality, so I think that the challenge is twofold. One is, I'm not the first to say it, I've heard it from others, that most salespeople know what they have to do. They're just reluctant to do it. And I think there's 2 things. I think some people are too enamored with perfection and they want to get it just right before they do it, as opposed to doing it, taking a lesson, adjusting, and then doing it again. Nobody's ever died trying some of the techniques that I teach. In fact,
Right.
nobody's ever lost a limb, right?
Yeah.
They have made money. So I think, that part of it is one that some people just want to perfect it before they try it. But on the other hand, especially when it comes to prospecting, where there's very few companies that have a process. They might have an app and they might have, some other things, but they don't have a process per se for prospecting, but they do for sales. So without that, it makes it difficult. I always say that, they say that people don't like to prospect because of the rejection. But if you look at the rejection rate for prospecting and for, sales accepted leads, it's about the same. It's about 2% different. Yet you never hear a salesperson saying that they don't want to go on a sales call in a sales accepted lead because there's a chance that by the time the process is finished, they'll be rejected. And I think the reason is that they have a process. They know what to do. They have contingencies if they hit a roadblock or a bottleneck or what have you, and they can go through the various stages of sale and follow the program. And as long as they do things relatively well, they should come out at the other end okay. And in those instances that they lose, and they lose about 83.59% of the time. That's on average. Some will do better, some will do worse. But, people who take a good prospecting program, whether it's mine or dozens of others that are out there, their rejection rate when they actually speak to a person is about 86%. So it's not that different. And I would argue that the reason they freak out over the 86% versus the 83.5% is the lack of process. I have nothing that I can go back to and understand what I could have done differently, where I can make changes, what are small incremental changes that I can continue to add to my execution. And the more that I do it without success, the more daunting it becomes, right?
Yeah.
So I think, to answer your question, I think the execution, that's where leadership needs to come in, because I think there's three elements that need to be there, that need to be present if you're going to be successful. You need to have an efficient means of generating the proper amount of leads. You need to be effective in talking to those leads and converting them. But you need leadership who can actually use data to help their salespeople continue to execute better, because the one reality is next year the quota is going up, but nobody's going to give us more time. So it's a continuous process of improvement. And I think without a process, it's hard to continuously improve because there's no continuity. So.
Yeah. I think from a prospecting standpoint, what do you see with the organizations that you've worked with and even the individuals that you've worked with? What separates the really good prospectors from the ones that just, that struggle with it? What do you see? Is it that, they have a set process in place, or they're just, they just don't give up? What is it that you see in those guys and girls?
I think it's a broader thing. So I think it begins before sales. I think most of them take that approach to anything in life, so they decide that they're going to succeed in a profession, or, they're going to buy a house or get a certain type of car. I find when you talk to them and you sort of explore what it is that helps them, continue to perform at the level that they do, they usually point to factors outside of sales. So they're able to understand how they're going to achieve their broader life goals, as opposed to strictly, what am I going to do this quarter for my pipeline type of thing. So I think that discipline of having those plans and actually moving towards them. And I always liken it to those people who, I don't know if you go to the gym, prior to the pandemic, I used to, and, I was one of those guys that was there day in, day out, right? And,
Right.
I had to put up with those guys in the early part of January who bought their memberships, came in a couple of times and decided that this was just too much, And I think it's the same thing. I think that, the people around me that I see at the gym, they're always asking other people how to do the same thing in a different way so they can get more effective, so they can hit a certain muscle and get a certain outcome and so on. And once somebody shows them how to do it, they actually do it. Most of the people, if they ask and somebody shows them how to do it, they'll go around saying they know how to do it, but they don't actually do it. So
Yeah.
that's the thing. So I think it's that same discipline. But if you ask me to bring it down to one thing, it would be curiosity, and specifically, how far can I go? And I think
Okay.
if you look at athletes, they're always talking about beating their personal best. It's not about beating George or about beating Betty. It's about beating your personal best. And I think that, again, I used to be upset if I wasn't at the top of the leaderboard. And I used to wonder how somebody who was consistently stuck in the bottom 2/3 could live with themselves. They probably were trying to figure out why the hell I was putting in such an effort. And I think that's where some of the differences come down, is ultimately the only person I have to beat is me. And to do that, I have to focus on the craft.
Yeah. Now, there's a lot of talk now, and I know prospecting has changed, not prospecting itself, but maybe the mode.
Mm-hmm.
How have you adjusted your training and kind of taught people? I know you got to have that message and that you also got to have the mode. Is there a balance there that you teach? Or, a lot of people, it's a numbers game. Are you more quality over the quantity? How do you approach that with the people that you work with?
So there's three questions in there that I hear. So
Yeah.
first of all, I don't think, I think it's a false paradigm. I understand why it's there, but I think it's a false paradigm to say, is it quantity or quality, right?
Okay.
Because I think, I understand what you say, that it's a numbers game. And I don't come from the school that says, just count your nose and you'll get a yes and
Right.
nirvana, right?
Right.
But it is a numbers game, because at the end of the day, your quota is a number, right?
Right.
And then working back from there, what does it take to get my quota? So let's say my quota was 1.2 million. and an average deal was 25 grand. So I know I need to get 4 deals a month, right?
Yeah. Back into
That's
it.
a number, right? You can't get away from that, right?
Right.
So then if I know what my proposal to close ratio is, then I could figure out how many proposals I need to generate every month in order to exceed quota. And then the next number that I need to know is how many people do I need to go through a discovery process with that will generate a genuine proposal, not a spaghetti proposal, but a genuine proposal, right?
Right.
And then how many people will I have to go out and meet with, whether that's through an environment like you and I are in on the web or face to face? How many of those do I have to encounter to get people to say, yeah, I'll go into a discovery process with you? I don't promise anything, but you said enough things to get me interested. And we use an activity calculator with our clients. People who are members of the Proactive Prospecting Club can get it, where you can plug the numbers in, your average deal size, this, that, and the other, and you can begin to see what you need to do to achieve quota. And you can also begin to see what elements of your game, fractional elements of your game, you can change to get results, because it's right there in the calculator. All you got to do is sit down with your manager or coach, depending on your environment, and come up with a logical coaching plan, which is not going to be overnight. I generally tell people counter about a quarter to change a particular skill that you want to change. But it's like painting a bridge. Like as soon as you finish one, you got to do the next one, because as I said earlier, your quota goes up.
Yeah.
So, but then once you know what your numbers are in terms of what I need to get, like it's a physical thing, right? You're only going to have so much, right?
Right.
So once you know that, then you can focus on the quality, right? Because the other number that comes into play that people want to ignore is the hours, right? You only got so many hours in a day, and you only got so many hours in a year, right?
Yeah.
So again, if you ignore the numbers, you're going to get blindsided. And that's why B2B salespeople don't make their quota, because they don't bother with the numbers, right?
Yeah.
So, so I think it is at that point when you turn to quality, how do you talk and so forth and so on.
Right.
So to the other question that you asked, I think that you got to let people sort of figure out the mode thing. And I think the problem with most people is they gravitate to the one of two modes, the one that they like most, or the safest, which is email, because you don't have to deal with the outcome. I remember reading this article. I was working for a division of Dow Jones back in the late 90s, and I ended up, having some responsibility for the mobile stuff at the time. If you recall, it was WAP was the big expression. And I was in, I think, Helsinki at the time, reading an article about how in Scandinavia, at that time, the younger people, teens, began to engage each other for dating via text messaging, or SMS, as they call it at the time.
Yeah.
And the psychologist opined that part of the reason was you don't have to deal with rejection, right? So, I think that some people move to that mode because they don't have to deal with the rejection. Whereas with the phone, it hits you, bam, right in the face. You got to deal with it every time, right? But the outcome is no different. And this is what should be driving things. If your email numbers are no better than your phone numbers, then why bother? And people can look this up on LinkedIn. I think the guy's name is Adam Grant. He's a workplace behavioral psychologist.
Yes. Yep.
And he did a post. And he talked about what it takes to network, and why some people are good and some people are not. And one of the things he highlighted was that they sent these people out to, I think, request a favor from a stranger, basically cold calling by definition, right?
Right.
And people who approach people directly, 6 people they approached directly had the same results as people who sent out 200 emails. So for me, if I'm worried about time and this, that, and I could take a hit in the face, I'd rather make 6 calls and move on with my day than spend time sending out 200 emails.
Yeah.
And that's why these sequencers have become so popular, because not only can I hide behind email, but I don't even have to do it. So, so now they're that much more removed from the experiences they're supposed to be having. And then they're wondering why it's not working. So in terms of the mode, what I encourage them to do is imagine their customer, because I'm a phone guy, but I know a lot of people that I reach out to are not phone people. So I'll use email. I use LinkedIn. I'll use snail mail, not snail mail, post office mail.
There you go.
And, so because I don't know what John would respond to best. I don't know what Jill would respond to best. And I'd be pretty stupid if I thought that everybody looks at the world the way that I do, right? So clearly I'm the only one that thinks Toronto is the center of the universe, right? So,
Yeah.
so I think with the modes, what I encourage them to do is to let go of their own biases and consider who they're calling, right? And, I've spoken to executives, and I know myself when I'm on the road, you know, when I'm traveling and all that, I probably won't answer the phone, but I'll look at email and text and respond to it, right? Because in airports and all that, the last thing I want to do is be stuck in a conversation, right? So with the modes, experiment, the more that you can bring on. But again, one of the limitations of sequencers is they can't do snail mail, they can't do touch points on LinkedIn, this, that, or the other. So again, and then lastly, I think the question was, what do you focus on in terms of the message? I did retain all three.
Yeah, you go.
I tend to take the same approach with everyone. And I know this is going to sound a bit odd, but I focus on why people buy. So there's a lot of conversation. You touched on it, how sales have changed and all that. But I think it's only changed on the surface where you see the applications and tools and things like that. And
Right.
a lot of those tools are forcing people to sell in a way that's not natural. And a few years ago, CEB did a study that showed that the more tools you had in place, and remember that these guys like to go to the club and talk about their stack, right? So the
Right.
more tools you have in place, the less efficient your sales team is. And you can look it up. It's on LinkedIn, or you can go to, I guess CEB is now Gartner, but you
Right.
can check it out. And they actually had a calculator that showed, because every time you have a tool, you have controls, you have touch points and all that. I'm working with a guy now where we were able to show that if you're going to prospect 10 people at 10 different companies, how many keystrokes do you have to do with Salesforce and other CRMs versus his system? And the difference is, I think, in the neighborhood of about 200 versus 10. So when you look at it from a time point of view, from an efficiency point of view, right? One is better than the other. And if you look at salespeople, if I have to hit 200 screens and clicks to prospect 10 people, is that an activity I'm really going to want to do?
Yeah.
Right. So we focus on why people buy. And I think that most people tend to buy to achieve objectives. Even the people who are in pain, right? The ones hitting your website, downloading everything that they can consume. Once they solve the pain that, they're currently experiencing, there's still an ongoing business that has objectives over the long term, right?
Right.
So what I focus on in terms of the narrative, the script, as it were, or the talk track, if we want to be up to date,
Yeah.
is hit the objectives that you know that those people are looking to achieve. How do you know them? Two forms. One is have a diligent review of all the deals that you win and lose, so you know what topics are getting traction and what topics are causing people to, repel from you. And then the other that you want to do is think about those things. Like, you should have a pretty good knowledge of the type of person or persons that you're trying to sell to. And I don't know what the busiest highway is in Nashville, but I know around San Francisco, it's 101. So what I try and figure out is the person that I'm calling, what are they thinking about on the last Wednesday of the quarter as they're stuck in traffic at 8:30 heading into a leadership team meeting? If I could speak to those topics, I might get traction with somebody who's status quo, who doesn't really care that I exist, right?
Right.
But most salespeople call that guy who doesn't care that I exist and they say, we solved this pain. You want it solved? And I go, I don't have that pain. Goodbye. Boom. Rejection. That drives discouragement in the salespeople. Whereas if you call that dude and talk to him, or dudette, let's not be chauvinistic, and talk to them about something that they were actually thinking about at that moment. And that's not hard to figure out, assuming, you've been in the industry for more than 20 minutes, right? So if you could speak to those things, then you're much likely to have a conversation. And that's all you really want to have in that initial engagement, have a conversation that concludes in them saying, yeah, I will dedicate time to listen to you, which is an appointment, right?
Yeah. Yeah. That's, those are powerful thoughts, or as I would call them, vitamins.
Vitamin T.
The data is important. I part of my career, a couple of years, was as a black belt, a Six Sigma black belt. So, and it's very process oriented, but the data that you talk about, knowing your numbers, those types of things, I think that's really powerful. And, the other thing that you hit on was, not only is that data powerful, but the message and the moat, pick one of them, whether it's, and get really good at it. You see people trying to get good at Twitter, at LinkedIn, all these different messages, platforms, but pick one of them and get real good at it. similar to what you should do with sales. Hiring and training. I wanted to talk with you about that because I know you've done a ton of hiring, and you've probably talked with so many organizations and heard their struggles. And it's not a secret that turnover in sales is high. What do you
Yeah.
think? What do you think are the biggest issues from a turnover standpoint? And what are the things that you've seen some of the real good organizations to eliminate, or I shouldn't say eliminate, but kind of mitigate that turnover with the sales professionals that they hire?
So I'm not sure I'm an expert and qualified to talk about this, but I do have opinions, as long as
Yep.
people take them in as opinions as opposed to expert advice. Because,
Yep.
I'm involved in hiring because clearly companies I work with do that, but I generally bring in a recruiter who's a professional.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't claim to be all things to all people, but as I said, I do have opinions.
That's right.
So I think I think part of the problem is, I'll say something that I hope is not taken as being controversial because it's not meant to be. But throughout my experience, when I was in the corporate world and now and so on, nothing has shaken my resolve that the most important layer in a sales organization is the frontline manager. It's the linchpin to success, right? Because they translate the messages from headquarters and they
Yeah.
submit the messages from the front line. And what they do to that signal can have a lot of impact on everybody involved.
Oh, yeah.
And so I think that that's where organizations really need to begin, because they don't give their managers permission to succeed. And again, I know it sounds silly, but when a territory is vacant, there's a lot of pressure on a manager to fill it.
Right.
And so they go out and fill it, just like I do my KPIs. Well, you told me to make 10 dials. You didn't tell me I have to make quality dials. You just said 10 dials, right?
Yeah.
You told me I have to fill it. I filled it. The guy can walk, it looks good, speaks English. What do you want? So
Yeah.
they get these people in there because they feel the pressure to have a body in the territory. And I understand that because they feel that they're losing out on revenue. They feel that the competitors now have looser reign in the territory. I understand the pressure. But think about the cost. Like, what does it cost to hire somebody, right? Just the cost of hiring and firing, right?
Yeah.
Never mind the emotional angst and the disruption and everything else that it brings with it. So I think that hiring is one of the ways to sort of minimize, the turnover issue. Minimize, not get rid of it at all.
Right.
Because, I think I was advantaged in that I managed in two unionized companies. So you learn real quick to put the people to the test, assess them, and really decide whether there's enough there that you can mold or whether you got to pull the trigger at around month 5 because then you're stuck with them for life because of the union. So it forced those of us who were willing to engage, because there were some managers who just went with the flow, but there was a number who realized that, this is a real test. Like, we need to come up with a program that in the first 5 months will tell us if this person has the raw material. They don't have to be perfect, but do they have the stuff that we can, evolve into a productive and successful for their own sake salespeople, right?
Right.
And I think if you spoke to most people, most sales managers, when they're hiring and all that, in the secret dark corner of the bar, they'll admit that they don't often do that diligently. Now, to be honest, a lot of them are not trained to do that diligently. Again, I was fortunate, although my employer wasn't at the time, that they were sued over hiring practices. So to cover their ass, they had all the managers go through this formal hiring thing, which gave me experience and got me to sort of look at it differently.
Yeah.
But, if you work for a company that hasn't been sued, you might be beat, right? So, so I think that there is a process. And if you look at some of the silly questions that they ask salespeople, what I learned in that is really go for the experiential, understand what's the most important things that they're likely to face in their day-to-day, and then ask them about times that they experienced similar things, putting a focus on what they learned. So, I'm not so much interested in the story and all that. I can catch that on Netflix. What I want to know is what they took away from it, even if it's a loss. And I'm much more impressed when somebody talks to me about when they had their ass handed to them by a customer and what they did as a result, as opposed to somebody who's constantly telling me about all these wins that, anybody could have gotten because they were selling pizza at the mall, right? So,
Right.
so I want to know what they learned from it. Whereas, again, these silly questions of where do you want to be in 5 years and do they really tell you whether the guy or gal can sell, or how they would deal with adverse situation? Like it's always the same. Where do you want to be in 5 years? I want to be in your chair. Oh, the guy's aggressive. Yeah, he's good.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and so I think hiring practices, it's much like putting on a mask. It's a great way to prevent getting COVID, right? So
Yeah.
you want to get COVID out of your bullpen, do better hiring practices, put on a mask. I think the other is training. And I don't say this because I'm a sales trainer. I say this because, again, I was fortunate that when I was in the corporate arena, the two employers that I worked for most had a very training culture. Every year they brought in different training. They had us go through. It wasn't an event-based type thing. It was something they truly believed in
Right.
and kept going. So what I noticed is that, much like anything, if you pay attention to it and you do it right in the early part, then you can have success. So again, a lot of onboarding programs that I see basically involve taking all this information that probably takes 2 years to assimilate and dumping it on an unsuspecting new hire in 2 weeks.
Right.
Right. And then sending them into the field and say, okay, you remember all that shit, you're ready to go. Right. So, I think that one company I worked for, who shall remain nameless, they had a great program, but I was part of, like, they would have a two-step program. They would bring people on for a week of training when they first started, and then 3 months later they would bring them back, for basically the survivors got more training, right?
Yeah.
So in that first week, I was the only thing that they talked to them about: sales, prospecting, right? Everything else was order entry, product combinations, different solutions, SKUs and things like that. The average guy didn't get his first order for 4 months. What the hell does he need to know how to enter an order for at least till 3.5 months down the road? So
Right.
instead of teaching the guy how to sell and what works in the industry and why people have bought from the company before and why people haven't bought from the company before and what business objectives we can knock out of the park every time and what business objectives we struggle with and this and that, they teach them how to enter an order, which they're never going to get because they don't know how to sell the stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think that if you just did those two things, if you incented your managers to hire right and penalize them for hiring wrong. So if they make a bad hire, some of their bonus should go with it.
Yeah.
They'll think twice about hiring, their next door neighbor.
Yeah.
Right. And then train them and keep training them. And again, a lot of the organizations that I'm working with now that, fortunate for me, are believers in continuous training. And that's why, when COVID came, instead of pulling back, they doubled down because they knew their people would need more support at this time. And as a result of that, again, not because of me, but their culture, they're rocking.
Yeah, absolutely. Now you have a unique, that I was reading on your website, you have an edge sales process. You call it the edge process.
Yeah.
What high level kind of, and I thought it was pretty cool because it focuses on the seller and the buyer. You got kind of both spectrums covered there in the acronym. Talk
Yeah.
about
So,
that a little bit.
acronyms are necessary, right?
Yeah.
I worked for one employer where I put together a training program, and we initially named it, tacit information transfer. And then we quickly realized that in a world of acronyms, tacit information transfer was not going to work. So we had to change it to tacit knowledge transfer.
Okay. Yeah.
And in all that, I lost what the question was. You were asking about the edge.
Yeah, the edge
So I
sales
found
process.
that acronyms work really well to help salespeople remember things. In fact, I did a video yesterday about how to triple your prospecting success, and it's the letters basically add up to things you should do.
Okay.
So, I thought edge was a good thing, and at the time I was playing with this sort of logo where I was going to call it knowledge. So you have the word know, KNW, and stylistically you can have the word L and then the word edge. So it's like no edge,
Gotcha.
Anyway,
Yeah.
I didn't go that route. But I did stick with the edge because of the acronym. And actually, to be fair, I developed that with two other guys, and each of us use it differently. We all go back to the edge concept because we developed it somewhere on the Jersey Shore, but we all use it differently.
Okay.
and Rick LaDuca and God, the other guy's name will come to me in a minute. Scott McLaughlin, sorry.
Okay.
So they should get credit because they co-developed it
Yeah.
with the three of us, and a couple of cases of wine. But
Yeah.
and we did think a lot about it because all three of us come from the point of view that ultimately you got to follow the money, and if you follow the money, it always starts with the customer's checkbook, right? So it's important that that checkbook be central to everything that we do, right? So
Yeah.
it was easy to figure out the buyer side. It was harder to figure out the seller side, but we wanted to make it fit the acronym. So we sort of started looking at the process, and part of the job of a salesperson is to bring somebody into the market. Yes, a certain number of buyers are there and ready, but our job is to bring people into the market, so we got to get them to engage, right?
Yep.
So and that's when they're trying to figure out how they're going to do things and all that. So when we do discovery, that's when they're defining their requirements, right?
Right.
And when we try and gain their commitment, that's when they sort of come up with a game plan. And that G was hard, that game plan, I was never really sure, but in a discussion, it sort of works.
Yeah.
And most of the people that I work with are very much like me, that they're looking for ongoing relationships. They're not looking for that one-time hit.
Yeah.
So you got to execute. And I think where sometimes we fail, and I've been a victim of this as well, is we fail to execute fully on what we sort of promised. And as a result, the customer, gets disappointed. And part of that is helping them execute internally, because
Right.
unless you're dealing with a small company and dealing with the owner, most of the people we're dealing with have some internal customers and accountabilities and so on. And we need to make sure that they're able to win and execute on their part.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, with that, and I'm not saying this is a negative, because I think I'm the same way. As salespeople are always thinking about us and how we can sell and how we can make, our quota and so on. So I wanted a way to turn the conversation at least back to the customer, so what we're doing serves their purpose as well. And this was at that time, and I still think to today, the easiest way that I could develop or I could come up with. If somebody has a better idea, I'm an open book, so let me know. But
Yeah. No, I thought that was a cool process that really incorporates how the seller goes through the process and the buyer is going through that same process at the same time. So I thought it was pretty cool. I thought that was just a really good way to do it.
If I could add one thing to it, the one thing that salespeople have as an advantage that they often fail to utilize is, if you're selling something that, let's say, has a shelf life of 3 years, let's say, a machinery or something like that, or an application, and so remember that that buyer likely hasn't gone through the buying experience for at least 3 years, right? And if they're new to the role, they probably have never gone through it. So they have all these ideas that are developed on their side of the fence from their perspective, but they've never actually gone through a buying process. So it's an opportunity that I think salespeople miss to educate the prospect on what this is all about, because we do it every day, right? So it's somewhat second nature. And sometimes we tend to not look at it in great detail, but if you can step back and from your experience, understand some of the challenges the buyers have had in the past, some of the things that they've overlooked, some of the things that they've been too attached to and things like that, then I think you can actually help that customer, because, ego is going to prevent them from saying, I haven't got a clue, right?
Yeah.
But their questions will give you the opportunity to educate and help them, and do it in a way that's sincere. Again, if you're a subject matter expert, share your expertise. So don't always, bang the product drum.
Right.
But, I think that there's a great advantage because we do this day in, day out. Buyers only do it once. That's why they bring in the procurement guy, right?
Right.
Because he's going to keep us at bay. But forget the money side of it and all that. We're out there every day. We are subject matter experts. I don't know more than the VP that I'm sitting down with at a particular time, because they're involved in their company and so forth. But I do know more about sales than they do, only because I see hundreds of companies every year. And as a result of that, if nothing else, I'm a conduit to other practices. And I think salespeople fail to take advantage of that and fail to educate their customers as to what they might be coming up against. And I find that when I tell them that these are some of the risks and these are some of the things that I've seen, they appreciate it, especially when they run into that hurdle after they don't believe you the first time.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's an awesome point, because the industry I'm in is a long sales cycle, and everything you may only renew every 3 to 6 years, and exactly what you talked about. You may have different decision makers. They're only buying from you every 3 to 6 years, so those are just dead on points. I've got one more question for you, but before
Sure.
we go to that question, tell all the listeners where they can get a hold of you. What's the best place to contact Tibor Shanto? Where do they need to get in contact with you at?
Well, the easiest is Tibor at tiborshanto.com. So Tibor at tiborshanto.com. Everything they need to know about me is there. And then there's also a new place that they can go and check out, which is something that I not launched, it's sort of a soft launch a couple of weeks ago, called the Proactive Prospecting Club. So if they go to proactiveprospecting.club, not com, we're a club, they can find the information there. And it's basically, as the name implies, a destination for people who have to or who want to prospect in a B2B career.
Okay, awesome. So all you listeners, go to that website. I'm going to just start calling him Vitamin T now, because he's given me permission to do that earlier. But it's really Tibor Shanto. But as far as the Sales Vitamin podcast, he's Vitamin T.
I'm going to go out and buy the domain Vitamin T as soon as we're finished, and then you can send them there.
Okay. Now, my last question for you is, I ask all the guests this. You've got one sales vitamin to give to some people you're talking with, or an organization you're talking with. And let's say you got one sales vitamin today, and you want to give it to them on execution. What's that one sales vitamin you would give to someone today about execution in their sales process?
No one ever died.
Okay.
And I'm not trying to be funny, but I think that sometimes it's our own preconceptions that prevent people from trying something. I remember a specific client, I was talking to him, and he had this great opportunity, 6-figure opportunity, but he had to reach out to somebody who he felt that didn't like them because of a previous experience. And I said, we'll change the name, but I said, Sam, if you don't call him, nothing changes and we're stuck where we are, right? If you call him and he says no, right, you're still no further behind where you are now. But if you call him and he says yes, the universe is yours, right? So you got nothing to lose to call, because the only thing that's going to get bruised is your ego. And that's relatively easy to soothe. But if you don't make that call, like if you don't go for it, right, because you're worried about a little bruise on your ego, or that, this, that, and the other, like, nobody, especially if you're making telephone calls, they don't know. My first job in the 80s was making cold calls. I remember my boss saying, if everybody you call, and I had to make 160 calls a day, if everybody you called today sat on the subway car on the way home with you, because they didn't have a car then, right? They wouldn't know who you are, and they don't know who you are. And that's a game I continue to play to this guy. I stand in line at Starbucks, and I wonder if the guy in front of me was the guy that just blew me off 5 minutes ago, because he doesn't know and I don't know. And that's how people should just go for it, because nobody ever died, and you can deal with the outcome no matter what it is.
Awesome. Awesome advice and awesome vitamins there. Hey, Tibor, thanks so much for coming on today. I know that the listeners, when we release this podcast, are going to get a ton of value out of this. I'm just honored to have you on the show today. And thanks so much for taking time to be with us.
No, pleasure was mine.